Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Marin Waters Watershed Recreation Planning meeting. This is our initial kickoff meeting. We want to thank you all for coming and also take a moment to recognize that we're building this process off of the recently completed e-bike review process, and more specifically, this watershed recreation management effort is being guided by the initial scoping phase that we carried out in 2021 through a series of public meetings. Through those series of public meetings, we're able to bring on a consultant, Alta Planning and Design, to assist the district with this recreation management planning process. So I'm Sean Horn, I'm the Watershed Resources Manager for Marin Water, and I'm going to introduce you to our consulting team that's going to help facilitate and work through this planning process with us. So I'll hand it over to Michael Jones from Alta first.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, my name is Michael Jones. I'm the principal in charge of this project. I'm a founder of Alta Planning and Design and based here in Marin County.
Great, thank you, Michael. And then we'll hand it over to Brian.
Hi, Brian Birchfield. I'm the project manager for Alta on this project and a landscape architect by trade.
Thank you, Brian. And then Cole.
Hi, my name is Cole Pfeiffer. I'm an assistant project manager and transportation planner by trade.
Thank you. And then Adrian, do you want to introduce yourself just to keep it going?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Adrian Mertens, the district's communications and public affairs manager.
All right, so a couple housekeeping items before we get going for tonight's meeting. Marin Water staff, we're going to walk you through some background information around the district. If you participated in the initial scoping phase, some of this might be repetitive, but please bear with us. We think it's important for foundation and framing this whole issue. And then secondly, we're going to hand it off to Alta to walk us through the recreation planning process, the initial scoping phase that we carried out, which led to the scope of work for this contract. And then the first major task of this project will be our visitor user survey and updating what we completed in 2013. And then we'll go through the schedule and the community engagement process. And you can hold it here for a moment, Cole. And at the end, we'll get to the public comment period. And we've got a couple of prompts that we're hoping people will focus on with their public comments to give us some foundational information to build off of through this planning process. If you want to make a public comment, we're going to keep those to the end of the meeting. So after the presentation is concluded, you can raise your hand during that time to get in the queue for making the public comment. If you're dialing in from a phone, you'll press *9 on your phone and that'll get you in the queue. From there, Alta will walk through each participant one by one. We'll allow you 2 minutes if we can to provide your public comment. If we have more than 30 participants wanting to make public comments, we're going to reduce the time to 1 minute. So just be aware of that. And if needed, we'll reduce it further. So with that, I wanted to start off this evening with just reading a passage from an outdoor recreation study that was completed. And this is called Outdoor Recreation and Environmental Stewardship, the Sustainable Symbiosis. And this was written by Ann Miller from the U.S. Forest Service's Pacific Northwest Research Station, Lincoln Larson from North Carolina State University's College of Natural Resources, Jeremy Wimpy from the Virginia Polytech Institute, and then Nathan Reiner from Recreation and Tourism. And I think this kind of just generally frames where we're going with this planning process. So to start out, this is kind of the problem statement in this paper, and then we'll put this on our website that we'll share with you soon. So the presence of recreationists on public lands is sometimes viewed as a threat to ecosystem integrity. Recreation can alter ecosystems, especially if not managed effectively. Likewise, inadequately managed recreational use has the potential to detract from the experiences of public land by other users. However, people interacting with their public lands through outdoor recreation can, and often do, act as stewards for these lands. In many cases, nature-based recreation experiences help to foster a connection to place, thereby strengthening environmental values and promoting conservation behaviors. In this respect, the use of public lands for recreation also adds values to these lands, potentially enhancing environmental health and human experience of public lands, and contributing to the conservation and appreciation of the ecosystems protected within their boundaries. So I wanted to share that, and we'll put it on our website that we've developed for the Watershed Recreation Management Plan, which has just been posted in the chat, because it kind of frames where we're going and the overarching goals of this planning process, which is really to explore how to protect the watershed's water resources and biodiversity while also supporting visitor access to the mount. It really recognizes that Mount Tamalpais and the district's watershed lands more specifically are loved and appreciated by a wide array of community members who come from various walks of life and who come to visit with various goals. And many times the issues that arise on the watershed are related to the goals and the disruption of those goals when you're visiting. So before we go into the presentation, we just want to acknowledge that we're at the beginning stages of this entire process. So we're going to be asking for some kind of foundational information here tonight that we're going to build off of. And throughout the process, you'll continue to have opportunities to provide public comment and input to shape the outcomes and where we go with this planning effort. So with that, I just want to kind of ask everyone to be patient, work with us, be respectful to the others that are participating in the process, and be ready to kind of come with an open mind and willing to have helpful, informative discussions to influence where we go. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation. We're going to try to keep this presentation to about 35 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for initial public comment on a couple issues. So many of you are very familiar with the lands that we're speaking about tonight. Just going to provide a bit of overview of the watershed that we manage here at Marin Water. We have about 21,000 acres of land. We have 7 municipal reservoirs. We serve water to about 190,000 community members in central and southern Marin. We know that our watershed is visited by upward of 1.8 million visitors annually. And this was what we found out when we conducted our 2013 watershed census survey, which we'll be updating as part of this process. We know that our watershed is very porous in terms of entrances. We have over 37 park entrances that people use to access the watershed. We have 92 miles of fire roads that we use to maintain our water infrastructure. Also, it supports emergency access to the watershed and also secondarily supports our fuel break infrastructure. And then these are also the facilities that provide recreational opportunities. We have 59 miles of trails, and we have 60 miles of non-system trails within the boundaries of the watershed. We have 7 picnic areas that are utilized by visitors, and the watershed is a rich natural area with significant biological diversity. We have 400 wildlife species that we know of, over 1,000 species of plants on the watershed. We're surrounded by other public lands, Point Reyes, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, state parks, and Marin County Parks and Open Space District. And we're part of the broader Golden Gate National Biosphere network. So with that, you can go to the next slide, please. So Marin Water's mission is to manage our natural resources in a sustainable manner and to provide our customers with reliable, high quality water at a reasonable price. And we're going to continuously come back to this primary mission of the district as we work through this planning process to remind people that we're talking about your drinking water when we're talking about managing the watershed. And so we need to be thinking about that thoughtfully as we think about recreation. So the next slide. So in our board policy, it gives us some direction on how to manage the watershed. In our first board policy, it provides direction to provide responsible stewardship of our land under the district's management to balance existing mandates to safeguard ecological integrity, protect against wildfire, and maintain water quality. It also provides for recreational opportunities and visitors' access to the watershed consistent with the constraints of watershed stewardship. So that's something we'll be thinking about as we move through this process. Next slide. Board policy number 7 is really focused on how we manage the watershed. It notes that the Mount Tamalpais watershed is one of Marin's most valuable natural resources, providing and protecting the major source of domestic water for the district's residents. Besides its primary purpose, the watershed is held in trust as a natural wildland of great biological diversity, as a scenic open space, and as an area for passive outdoor recreation for much of Marin and the greater Bay Area. So we'll talk about that more as we move through this planning process as well. So watershed plans that we've got existing. Watershed management's not new to the district. We've been doing this for many years. We have our Mount Tam Roads and Trails Management Plan, which outlines our system trails and the best management practices that we utilize in order to maintain those trails and those fire roads to protect resources and provide access. Our Lagunitas Creek Stewardship Plan outlines this biological monitoring activities that the district does in Lagunitas Creek and the restoration efforts that we carry out in order to protect the resources as a function of our water rights and the water board order. The watershed census survey that we completed in 2013 was kind of a snapshot in time, showing us how people were using the watershed, the different modes they were using, and the experiences they were having while out on the watershed. That'll be updated as part of this planning process through ALTA. And I'll just note that ALTA assisted the district in 2013 with that original watershed census survey. So we'll be updating and following many of the kind of standards that were set in that initial survey. We also support and participate in the One Tam Peak Health Report that was published in 2016, which took all of the biological monitoring information that public lands, including Marin Water, had been collecting over the years and synthesized it into one report to look at the health of the mountain at a point in time. And that, I'll speak more to that as we go through too. So the next plan that we've implemented on the district is the Biodiversity Fires and Fuels Integrated Plan, which was adopted in 2019, which is really about managing wildfire hazards on the watershed and restoring ecosystem function, with the focus on restoring forests to reduce fuel loads, address threats such as sudden oak death and the expansion of invasive species on the watershed, and then carry out some additional biological inventories. So we'll go to the next slide. So the district has been doing a number of inventories on the watershed that will be fed into this process. We conduct yellow-legged frog inventories in Carson Creek. We conducted osprey monitoring for many years around Kent Lake. We conduct triannual bird monitoring with our partners at Point Blue on the watershed since 1996. We've carried out rare plant inventories on the watershed, supported the serpentine endemic occupancy surveys through the One Tam partnership, also support the early detection, rapid response for invasive species, looking at how to manage those early, and then monitoring northern spotted owl populations to inform our activities on the watershed, and also conducting lichen biodiversity inventories to understand the biological richness, and then supporting our adult salmon monitoring, as well as our juvenile monitoring and other activities within the Logneys Creek watershed to understand the health of that system. And then in future years, we're working on forest pests and pathogens to understand some of the threats that we have. We're also supporting the One Tam Forest Health Strategy, which is looking broadly at kind of the conditions of our forests and activities that we can do to restore those, and then feeding all of this information up into the One Tam Peak Health Update, which will be coming out in the next year or so. So with that, we wanted to provide the background and the framing to help people understand that as we move into this recreation management planning process, we're really looking at it through the lens of a water district, thinking about managing our watershed lands to protect water quality and biodiversity. And we really want to emphasize that point, and we'll continue to come back to it as we move through this. We want to acknowledge that as we go into this, many of the issues that we're managing here in Marin and on the district's watershed, they're complex visitor-related issues that aren't unique to Marin County. These are issues that we see throughout the state on other public lands, and they're issues that we're trying to resolve, and we're going to be looking for lessons learned from other water districts specifically to think about how we can improve our operations and our management of the watershed to address some of the issues that people see on the watershed. I also want to just note before I hand it off to Alta that it's important to recognize that this planning process won't solve all the issues. We'll continue to have issues. We'll be able to address some of those issues through this planning process, but it's not reasonable for us to think that we'll resolve all the potential issues that are out there through one planning effort. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian, and he's going to walk us through the scope of work for the planning process and the ways that the community will be able to engage in it.
All right, thanks, Sean. So to begin with, last year, the Water District went through an initial public scoping phase where they partnered with the Golden Gate National Park Conservancy, who supported them in facilitating 2 public scoping meetings. And as part of those 2 scoping meetings, the district outreached to 57 community-based organizations and encouraged them to participate and help them develop the scope for what we're now underway with, being the management recreation plan. The 2 public scoping meetings had a total of 227 community members that participated, which is really great. Hopefully some of you who participated in that are on the call tonight. The first meeting last year was in the spring, May, where guest speakers presented on some potential foundational concepts that could become part of this recreation plan and provide an overview of what the plan could be. And then on June 25th, there was a follow-up meeting where the district facilitated breakout sessions and really listened to the community and solicited community input on what this recreation process could evolve to become. And the outcome of this effort was a summary memo that captured community input. and ultimately led to our scope, which we'll share a little bit about in the upcoming slides. So again, in a little more detail, overarching themes from this public scoping process, the public really wanted us and the public and stakeholders to emphasize a data-driven decision-making process. So looking at data to guide our management recommendations. Really a significant and robust ongoing public engagement process throughout the course of this project, a public engagement process that is really as inclusive as it can be. And the plan itself, when looking at management recommendations and improvements, should also focus on equitable access and diverse user groups, not catering to one specific subset of the community, but really looking at as many different opinions and opportunities as we can. And then of course, what Sean was mentioning is the compromise potentially needed to balance conservation and recreation. So that's really the challenge we face. And then looking at stewardship as a foundation of the project and using stewardship and support to protect the biodiversity and the water quality on the watershed. So now we'll get in and speak briefly about the specific scope for this project. And again, I want to emphasize that we're just really getting underway with this project. This is our first contact point with the public. We haven't done a whole lot of work to date, and we're in the data collection phase. So one task we have completed is the literature review. And the literature review is really just a summary of the previous planning documents, wanting to acknowledge the work that has been done to date. A lot of those plans that Sean mentioned, we wanted to capture that and make that part of this plan. There's a visitor census survey update. Sorry, Cole, if you can go back one more slide. Thanks. A visitor census survey update, which we'll be speaking about in a couple of slides. A couple other things I wanted to touch on briefly, the recreation facilities assessment, and that will really focus on aligning recreational activities with the district's mission. And part of that evaluation will consider carrying capacity of the different facilities and the different user groups and the conflicts that arise within the watershed. Another thing we're excited to look into as part of this plan is an adaptive management strategy, because we recognize that these recommendations aren't going to be one size fits all. We expect them to evolve over time and also be different within different zones of the watershed. So that's a big goal of this project, is to have an adaptive management strategy. So again, just a quick summary of the literature review. The literature review, the task that we've been working on to date. We're acknowledging a lot of planning work has been done on the watershed over the years, various planning studies, environmental, biological documents, local press and news articles. And we wanted to make sure that past work was recognized. So this section of the plan will be a summary of all these documents and bullet points that highlight the key takeaways and what can be learned from each of these previous documents. And knowing we're not reinventing the wheel here, we have a lot of great planning that's already been done to date that can guide our decision making. We'll also be, as part of this task, interviewing a series of other relevant water districts to better understand how they deal with recreation. As you may know, some water districts don't allow public access to their land, and others do. So the ones that do, how do they handle various conflicts that arise on their land and deal with different forms of recreation along their facilities? Next slide. And then I'm going to turn it over now briefly to Cole to discuss the visitor use surveys, which is our next upcoming task.
Thank you, Brian. And another component of this project will be the data-driven decision-making, ensuring that data is really baked into how we're identifying recommendations and developing those. Our approach will allow us to evaluate how people are moving within the watershed, as well as how they're reaching the watershed. We'll capture volume data on trails and fire roads by installing some automatic counters. These counters will give us a strong sense of total level of usage at specific locations in the watershed. And then we'll also leverage some available trip data from trails apps such as Strava to determine some specific trails, fire roads that are being used most frequently. And we will connect that with our raw count data to give us a highly accurate reflection of usage throughout the watershed. The project will also evaluate the experience of visitors by conducting a visitor intercept survey. And as Sean mentioned, this will be kind of a revamp of the survey conducted in 2012, 2013. It'll follow a similar methodology by collecting surveys at 21 different locations throughout the watershed. And this will provide watershed with a clear picture of how visitation trends have changed over time, such as peak visitation times or modes that visitors use. Multiple different data sets will provide the district with a holistic analysis of how visitors travel to and within the watershed, and will provide some strong data-driven decision-making through the process. And with that, I'll pass it back to Brian to talk about some key project outputs.
All right, so, how do we develop this visitor use management framework, and what tools do we use? So that there's 4 steps as we see it, quickly summarized. But the first one is the why, the building the foundation of the plan. What is the purpose or need? What issues are we facing? And this is based, again, on a lot of feedback that we received and the district received during the initial scoping report that was done last year. And then the next step after the why is the what, defining visitor use management direction. What are our desired outcomes or conditions? And this is what we hope to collect during this ongoing outreach process, the first one being tonight, as well as the visitor census surveys that we'll be conducting later this summer. We really want to better understand what the desired outcomes are and conditions, and how the watershed is being used currently. And then moving beyond that into future tasks of this plan is the how, or the identifying of management strategies. Which strategies can we use to achieve these desired conditions? And then finally, the fourth bullet point, the do, again emphasizes the approach that our strategy will be adaptive and will have to evolve over time. We'll recommend maybe an initial set of objectives, but be willing to adjust them based on monitoring data and what the district sees as we move forward. Okay, transitioning a bit to talk in a little more detail about the community engagement planning process and upcoming schedule. The blue boxes along the top of this graphic are the key project milestones. You'll notice they tie in closely to the scope that we mentioned a couple slides ago. And we've organized the public outreach to align closely with each of these key milestones. So you'll see the second line in green and dark blue are our touch points with the public and future ongoing public outreach meetings. And we've developed a community engagement plan working closely with the district that emphasizes using a lot of different formats for public outreach in an effort to connect with as broad a spectrum as the community as we can. So we plan on some of the meetings being online, like tonight. Some of these outreach opportunities will be in person, maybe in one common spot or room, like a traditional town hall meeting. And we're also excited to have a few site visits and get the public out in the field for a few targeted opportunities, which you see in the third line, the site visits 1, 2, and 3, the first one upcoming in July. So again, multiple opportunities to solicit input from the public, and we're doing it in a variety of different formats. Next slide. A little more of a detailed schedule of the upcoming community workshop and engagement activities. I apologize, this may be a bit hard to read, but you can find this all at the project website. It's spelled out in detail, and the website is here at the bottom of the slide, and we've also placed it in the chat. Sorry, you can go back for 1 second, Cole. I just wanted to highlight a few of the near-term upcoming opportunities. So the next community workshop is planned for early July, or I guess the second week of July. That's community workshop 2, and in that event we'll be presenting our initial questions for the watershed census survey and soliciting input on that. We also have a couple of site visits planned, one for early July, and then we do want to note that the second watershed site visit, which is planned for August 3rd, and it says watershed data collection volunteer opportunity, because we're going to need volunteer support in collecting or getting responses on these surveys, and that more likely than not will be spread over a week or two. It's not going to be one event to get all the volunteers at one place at one time. We'll probably offer that over 1 to 2 weeks. The other thing we want to note about this schedule is it's a working schedule, and the dates may change or the topics may be altered slightly depending on the feedback we begin receiving. So this isn't set in stone yet and is subject to change. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sean. He'll go into a little more detail about these upcoming watershed site visits.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So these public meetings that we're having now and the ones that Brian just overviewed in the schedule, they're really meant to provide the community with an opportunity to hear more about the planning process as it unfolds and also provide input. And they're going to be kind of our working meetings where we actually start to grapple with the issues we're seeing and the things that we want to resolve. The watershed site visits, though, are going to be more of a shared experience on the watershed. We're not going to go and have really structured agendas and deep discussions around the planning process. We're really just inviting people out to the watershed to experience the watershed. And we're trying to kind of look at the watershed in different ways through these processes. So the first one, or through these site visits. So the first one we're going to organize a hike around one of our reservoirs where we have rangers and maintenance staff kind of talk you through some of the issues that we see, take you on a walk around the lake, and then we're going to switch the group. We're going to break the group up into two, and we're going to switch at a midpoint, and then there's going to be kind of biologists that are walking you around the lake as well, talking about some of the issues that recreation causes and some of the ways that we've been able to address those issues and help us kind of spur thinking for when we come back to these meetings, we can share observations and thoughts on those outings. And so, as Brian mentioned, we're going to need volunteers for helping with the watershed census survey. That's how we did it in 2013. And that's how we're going to do it again in this next round. It'll be staff and volunteers going out onto the watershed. And so we're trying to align it with the same period of time. So it'll be kind of August, September timeline where we'll be doing those, and we'll be asking people to come out. We'll have specific points that you'll support this survey, and we'll connect with the visitors on the watershed during different times of the week at different hours and trying to get input from them about their experiences. And then we'll go kind of right to the heart of this, and we'll, on our third site visit, talk about roads and trails, and we'll review the Azalea Hill project, which is one of the more recent projects the district's taken on in terms of trail work and is implementing currently. So we'll talk about that project and the ways that we brought that to life and are implementing it. As we've mentioned a number of times, there is a watershed recreation management website and webpage on Marin Water's page. It's linked in the chat. It's here again for you. There's also a way, if you haven't already, to sign up for our listserv for email notifications. We've tried to improve that through the process because we have had a number of these different processes and collected people's emails to keep you updated, but now we've formalized it on this page here. So if you want to keep getting notified about these opportunities, please go there and sign up, because that's going to be critical for you to get the information. And then last point on the website, the presentation that we're doing tonight, the article that I referenced in the beginning, and other resources as we develop them will be posted on the webpage and the meetings that we're having, on the dates of the meetings that they're associated with. And then we also have our supporting documents, whether it be our biodiversity fires and fuels plan, our roads and trails plan, our watershed census survey. Those are all linked there as well. So we'll continue to build out that page as we go through this process so everyone has the same information. Move on, Cole. And then before I hand it over to Michael to kind of start to facilitate our public input period and process, I just want to note that this is part of the team that you're seeing here tonight. There is a broader team working on this project. Alta has partnered with ESA, who's bringing kind of the biological lens to this project, and will be kind of synthesizing Marin Water's biological monitoring data to look at kind of the recreation ecology and ways that we can better protect resources through reviewing and overlaying roads and trails on top of the resources and biological data that we have. And then also this whole process is being guided and supported by a professor at Oregon State, Ashley D'Antonio, who comes from a recreation ecology background and who supported our initial scoping phase. And so she'll be also presenting at these meetings in the future and helping us think about recreation, how we use data to make decisions, and how we kind of support the process and stakeholder involvement. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael to kind of walk us through what we want to get out of all of you tonight with the public input period.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Next slide.
So Michael, I think your audio is freezing a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take over from this. So the public
comments from the public. How's it now? Is it all right?
seems to be better, Michael. Or I spoke too soon. All right, so for the public comment period, what we're hoping to get from people this evening is we really would like you to, share your thoughts with us, but really, if you can, focus on what issues are you seeing on the watershed, or do you think we're facing as a water district who is managing the watershed for, the joint purpose of providing water and providing visitor access. We really want to hear about what, future desired conditions. We want to have thoughtful conversations about what desired conditions should we be managing towards, because that's kind of the key to this whole thing, is to understand where are we going, right? And then we want you to think about, like, how do these desired conditions resolve some of the issues that you perceive on the watershed, recognizing that everybody comes from different walks of life, has different kind of values, and will be seeing things differently. And so we want to hear your thoughts on kind of how you'd like to be, how you'd like us to be thinking about the issues on the watershed. So I'll kind of leave it at that. And we are going to ask everyone, if you want to make a comment, to now raise your hand, and we'll put it in a queue, and we'll start working through that queue. And I think we've got a rapidly expanding queue of folks now. So we'll start out at 2 minutes. And if you need to use the raised hand in the Zoom features, or *9 if you're on a telephone, and we'll start out with 2 minutes. And as we get more, we might have to reduce that to 1 minute. But thank you. And Cole, I'll hand it to you to kind of manage the public comment.
All right, I'll actually start off managing, since he has the PowerPoint slide. So the first comment we can hear from is Roger Roberts. So Roger, you should be able to talk now.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sean, you've heard me say this before, but I think it bears repeating. And that is, one of the outcomes of all of this effort has to include comprehensive signing as a management tool. And I would hope that the work plan ultimately will incorporate a comprehensive signage program in order to achieve the management objectives that this recreation plan will have. And that may mean that you're going to have to start looking for grants as you proceed with this project, or when you complete the recreation plan. But that's a tool, I think, that has been neglected and needs a great deal of attention. And I think it would help immensely in terms of making people aware of, what things they can do and where they can do them and how they can do them and use them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Roger.
Okay, next can be Brendan Mitchell.
Hi there. This is Brendan Mitchell. I'm a resident in Mill Valley. Father, hiker, biker. I don't know how to ride a horse, but just a couple of things I wanted to point out. I think first off, the comps that you look at in your research, I would encourage you to look beyond other water districts, to National Forest Service, other city parks. I think the watershed is particularly unique in its size and how much it's used. So I wouldn't want you to limit case examples for creative, successful solutions other communities have deployed. Second, as we survey users, I would encourage looking at different generations of users. I would hate for an outspoken older contingent to have a voice that's heard louder than future users of the watershed. So whether that means reaching out to middle schools, high schools, just please make sure that everyone is included in the process. And third point, I heard that the term conflict used. I would encourage that term to be avoided as we go through this process. I think there's different users groups that may encounter each other or get the pleasure of meeting on a trail. And I would hate for us to conclude that that's a conflict because I think it may lead to a poor outcome from the overall effort. And lastly, just as it relates to the fuels management, as we think about making sure there's sufficient access to all parts of the watershed, we may want to look at the Woodward fire a couple years back in Point Reyes as an interesting case example where limited access to certain areas probably led to a bigger event than many of us would have liked. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brendan.
All right, and then next will be Cathy. Don't have her last name.
Unmute myself. Hi, this is Cathy Russo, and I am an equestrian, and I run Marin Stables that is located in Fairfax. And I know we want to stay away from the verbiage of conflict, but if we avoid that, then how are we going to address it? And I've been riding the trails now for over 30 plus years, and I've seen a lot of changes, and I've seen a lot of really good positive moves. But the question is safety, monitoring, and how do we get to respect each other? And every time I think we move forward, I have an incident from a horse person's perspective that makes me wonder, how do we resolve this? And in February, I was riding my horse on a Sunday. A bike came flying around the corner, spooked my horse. So I decided to get off and walk. And as I was walking down the hill, I slipped on gravel. My ankle rolled into an erosion track made by something, and I broke my ankle. So now I'm being in a gurney, brought down the fire road. And when I didn't think I could see anything like this before, there's maybe 3 feet between me and the berm, and 2 bicycles came by at 15 miles an hour and almost hit the gurney and knocked me off it. And I was just like, are you kidding me? That there was such lack of respect for an injured person on the mountain. How do we address that? And I think we all want to pretend it doesn't happen, but it does. And I was just caught off guard and shocked. And so I just really want to focus that if we're going to open this up and we're going to open the trails up, we really, really, really have to educate, monitor, and really think about safety. That's it.
Thank you, Cathy. Brian, we'll go on to the next one.
Sure. Nona Dennis is up next.
Now you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, Nona.
Okay, good. All right, thanks. Yeah, I want to. You asked for us to identify issues, and I do want to. The first one you mentioned was issues. Okay. I think for many of us, what we see most is a huge disconnect between what the public seems to want from the water district and what the water district can really afford to do. Resources, financial resources, human resources. We see want, and we say, how is a water district, which is charged with providing water, which has ratepayers who resent paying for something besides their water, how are they going to afford the kind of ranger work that would be required for expanding public use? I think that's the main one. The other is that I would like to see in connection with being a data-driven study, how you're going to reach those people who are now disenfranchised. And I'm using equity and inclusivity, not in terms of users that exist, but also those, but really those who do not exist, from underserved communities and so forth. How are you going to get data which will show what the need is for these underserved communities to fulfill one of the goals of the plan? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nona, and thanks for bringing it back to the prompts of what issues are you seeing and what desired future conditions would you like to see come out of this process. So I'll hand it back to you, Brian.
Sure, Gary Yost, you're up next.
Hello, thank you. So I'd like to build off of what Nona just said regarding use, impacts of use, and staffing. So there was a census in 2013 that showed 1.8 million people are using the mountain per year, and that almost definitely is significantly higher because we saw so many more people from the Bay Area coming to Mount Tam during the pandemic. And I'm not sure exactly how many rangers are on staff now, but it seems to be less than there were before. I was on a Watershed Citizen Committee in 2017. We met regularly for a year, and one of the big concerns then was staffing, and it seems like staffing is less now, and this increased use, the impacts that's having on being able to safely manage the people in the watershed seems to be one of the major issues. And as ratepayers, we are funding this, but of course there are people from all over the Bay Area who are coming and joining the mountain that aren't ratepayers. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the people who use the mountain and the people who pay for its maintenance and safety. So I don't know what the solution to any of these things are, but they're definitely more challenging than they have been in the past. And I think we need to address them as part of this plan.
Great, thank you, Gary. Appreciate the comment.
Linda Novi, our next speaker.
Hi, I'm a hiker and an equestrian, and I have been visiting Mount Tam for many, many years. And I guess I'm part of one of the older crowd that visits the preserve, but I don't want to, I want my voice to be heard as well. I think it's important that everyone agree to care for the commons and adhere to the rules. That means going slow. That means not riding on trails for horses that we're not allowed to, and the same for bikes. Personally, I want to have more nature-based experiences in the watershed, and that's difficult when you are looking over your shoulder because frankly, there may be a speeding bike coming up on you. My hope for the watershed is that we can protect many, many areas of the watershed and have no access. I would like to see areas of the watershed closed to visitation so that wildlife has a place to go. I also would like you to consider how this plan will think about enforcement. I think more ranger presence is needed along with other tools to help protect the commons. You've made some strides on the ease of reporting conditions on the trails and roads, but that still needs to be updated and upgraded. And then my last point is a question: how will the 60 miles of social trails be addressed? I live near Cascade Canyon Preserve, and this preserve is below MMWD lands. And there's a lot of illegal bike riding on Carey Camp and Y2K, which come off Penn Mountain Road. And those trails have been, I'm going to say, destroyed by mountain bike riders illegally. I'd like them restored to hiking. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Next up is Nate McKitterick.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Nate McKitterick. My family and I live in San Anselmo. I was a planning commissioner for over a decade. My family are regular watershed users, including our two high schoolers at Archie Williams. We access the watershed on foot or by bike, but not by car. I started visiting the watershed in 1989. I'm encouraged by the district's focus on data-driven decisions in this process. My family wishes that there were more trails accessible by bike. A number of scientific studies have concluded a similar relative impact between hiking and biking, and that all the way back to the 1994 study in the Gallatin National Forest to the recent study in the Journal of Environmental Studies by Evju and Hagen. We'd also like consideration of ideas such as weekday only access, even odd day access, time of year access, and other tools that have successfully been used by many other land managers. By looking at the data, our hope is that the district can better manage both the watershed resources and the users so that everybody, from equestrians to hikers to bikers and to people like us that overlap those groups, can have an enjoyable experience in the lands that we pay for and love. Thank you.
All right, and Larry Breichman, you're next.
Larry, yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that. Just a brief comment to follow up on Sean's, that I'm really glad we're focusing on it being a process, a data-driven process. And I think that means we're all going to come in with some opinions and biases that we need to kind of put aside until we get through the data process and discuss it and come to some common agreement about the data. The other thing that I think is really important is that it's going to be an adaptive management plan. We're seeing right now with the advent of e-bikes that recreation is a very dynamic process, especially now. And so I think not only are the activities changing, the numbers of people are changing. We need to change. We're going to need to adapt. And I think it is going to need to be a living document, which should give folks a little greater optimism about getting to yes. I think it's important for people to understand. I don't think anybody should expect to get everything they're expecting, but I think everyone should expect to get something to improve their access or recreational opportunities. It's all going to have to mesh. And again, I think the fact that it's an adaptive process is a really important concept to keep in mind as we go forward. And I think it's long overdue, and really appreciate staff's getting it together and working with the consultants. So I'll be standing by as we go through this. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Larry.
And next we have a call-in number. The last four digits of the phone number are 1402. 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I think the key data that should drive this process is financial data. Specifically, the process should consider recreation in conjunction with the district's overall budget challenges. The district's key mission is to provide water, and that will require expensive new water sources in the context of drought and climate change. What will that leave for financing recreation? As a practical matter, recreation will be financed only by what is left after expensive new water sources are financed. Therefore, I'm not really sure that one can make much progress in conjunction with recreation planning until the conclusion of the current water source planning process that is underway. In any event, please remember that the key stakeholders in this process are Marin County ratepayers, not bikers, hikers, or equestrians. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Meg Rogers is our next speaker.
Sorry, guys. Nate Rogers.
MEG. Meg, MEG, Rogers.
Oh,
sorry.
Meg Rogers.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't unmute for some reason. My name is Meg Rogers. I live in Tiburon. I'm a lifetime member of the Sierra Club, a hiker and a mountain biker. I think Nate McKittrick and Larry Bragman expressed some of my feelings better than I can. And I'm very grateful that this work is being undertaken. And I know that a lot of the issues that have been raised have been solved in other communities by a variety of very creative means, including funding for trail use and charging for trail use and things like that. I do have one question that I haven't heard addressed in context with the water district. And I'm relatively new in the area, so it may be something that's been addressed in the past that I'm not aware of. And that is that I wonder about the ecological impact, both of dog feces and of manure that's left on the trails. So I'm very optimistic about this process. And I think that with good nature and creative people, we can come to some great solutions.
Thank you, Meg.
Tom Boss is up next.
Good evening, everybody. Tom Boss with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. We want a process that's focused on current and future recreation trends, and one that's based on science and data, something that's been heard quite a bit here today. Today, roughly 1 in 3 people recreating on the watershed is riding a bicycle. A majority of those people live in Marin County and are likely district ratepayers. For this process and the resources expended to be meaningful and successful, one outcome must be a better approach to managing bike access on the watershed. We have a civic duty here to work together on solutions. The bicycle community is ready to roll up its sleeves, demonstrate our conservation values, and work with other visitor groups and stakeholders to coexist through collaboration. We are committed to the guiding principles of safety, equity, and sustainability. We agree with many of the things that have been said here tonight. Also, I just wanted a few things. We talk about conflict. Sometimes we think of that as a negative thing, but a lot of times conflict is a misunderstanding. Or I don't even know if the word's conflict. It's more of an incident where a cyclist might go by some people kind of fast on a fire road and not assuming they're not going to create any safety hazard, but they don't realize that they're maybe startling the other people. So a lot of times it's just about misunderstanding, and that's what we need to focus on, I think, is education. Expanding public, we've heard about expanding public use. There's already 1.8 million people visiting Mount Tam. It's been a recreation destination for a century. So I think we're really just talking about managing the people who are already on the watershed. A few last things. Look at Lake Sonoma, Folsom Lake, Whiskeytown Lake is examples of where recreation is allowed, and leverage the high school mountain bike and running teams for the survey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom.
All right, next is Larry Minikes. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
Yes, thank you. You got my name, okay. To Gary Yost's comment, I'd like to mention that there was a recent financial meeting, financial committee meeting, and one of the cuts is to delay the recreation management plan, estimated at $100,000. Another cut is to delay filling open positions. There are currently 19 open positions in including 13 seasonal hires. So there's a disconnect here about looking for ways to increase or modify recreation, but without the capabilities of managing it if we're not going to have the people there. And I'd like to point out, you know, Alta Planning and Design is a very good firm. You know, I'm reading here, they are the leading multimodal transportation firm that specializes in design, planning, and implementation of bicycle, pedestrian, and greenway park and trail corridors and systems. And one of the users, one of the speakers said that all users should be included in the process, not just older users, but future users. The concern here, and Sean had an early slide up showing that there are over 400 forms of wildlife and over 1,000 rare and endangered plants that have been identified. It's on the watershed. It's also important to understand that this is the part of the Golden Gate Biosphere Network. It's an internationally recognized biosphere, and it's one of the ecologically most sensitive areas there are. And all we are talking about is human-centric use. Where are we talking about wildlife? Where is this coming into this conversation? That is where it should be based. This is what I've been saying from the very start, that it has to work from wildlife outward. Thank you so much. That is my comments.
Thank you, Larry.
Next up is Joel Garland.
Good evening. I'd like to advocate, my name is Joel Garland. I'd like to advocate for the completion of all regional trails that route through the watershed. Specifically, I'm referring to the Bay Area Ridge Trail. Currently, the Ridge Trail has a gap for people on horses and people on bikes through the watershed from Rock Springs to Bolinas Fairfax Road. The route is connected for hikers on national and state park lands, but the Ridge Trail won't be complete until there's a connection for people who are riding also. Please include in the goals for the plan, completing the Ridge Trail and any other regional trails that run through the watershed. With respect to the Ridge Trail, if you keep it up on the ridge near Ridgecrest, that would probably mitigate any impacts on water quality and probably also on wildlife. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
Next is Patrick Linehan.
Hi, my name is Patrick Linehan, resident of Mill Valley. Just want to thank staff for engaging with the community and starting this process. It's long overdue. I hike in the district with my son, birdwatch, mountain bike. Primarily, I like to mountain bike in the district because it allows me to get deeper into the backcountry. I'd like to see in this plan, new trail management solutions that worked in other places, including separate, users, distributing use more evenly, time allocation, even odd time of day, seasonal closures. Also like to address some of the wildlife concerns. I think there's numerous studies that show dogs off leash are displacing animals, and we should look at how we can mitigate the impacts where a bike comes through an area really quickly, where you have dogs off leash pushing animals out of areas. Also, I'd like to say the water tastes pretty damn good. I drink it straight from the tap. I think the district's doing a good job, and looking forward to participating in this process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick.
Daniel Hoffman is up next.
Hi, thank you. I am a user of the watershed. I fish the watershed quite often, and I just want the plan to recognize the watershed as a regional fishery for freshwater. I think there are not that many in the area. I hope that there's increased public information on the fishery and the management of the fishery, and that it is considered in your plan. That's it.
Great, thank you, Daniel.
Vernon Huffman is next.
Thank you. This is Vernon Huffman. I'm an executive director of the Access for Facts Foundation. I'm representing over 2,500 mountain bikers here in Marin County. I and my fellow stakeholders are concerned with recreation and how it is managed on the watershed. We believe that recreation, water delivery, and environmental protection can all be accomplished in harmony. To do that, we have to acknowledge that the demographic of our users has changed over the decades, both in preferred mode of access, in color, and economic status. Bike riders currently represent the second largest user group, although your new surveys might prove we are the #1 user group, especially when we provide the survey more than 1 mile from a trailhead. Any plan that not only acknowledges this, but additionally celebrates it will not be considered progress. We are the new face of the watershed and therefore the newest protectors of the water. We are the eyes and ears out there, and we should be enlisted and encouraged in that role. Water is life, and we ought to defend it and make others know that the modern environmentalist and conservationist might be on 2 wheels. We believe that by looking at success stories in other urban areas and by following best management practices, we can improve the visitor experience, reduce maintenance costs, and reduce impacts on the habitat. Our user group has waited for decades for an improved experience. Therefore, we are relying on this process and its success. Over this year of planning, one thing should be paramount to every one of us, whether you are an elected leader, a staff member, a contracted service, or a member of the public, and that is compromise. Because no one of us will get everything we want. But if we recognize that we all want rewarding experiences in nature with a priority on resource protection, and we keep an open mind without judgment of those people different than ourselves, then we can all come out of this on the other end with satisfaction. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Vernon.
Terry Thomas is next.
All right, sorry about that lack of time there. My name is Terry Thomas. I'm a naturalist. I have retired from a career in ecology, and I have always been amazed that Mount Tamalpais was saved and that it has continued to have so much biodiversity that's just a joy for all of us. And that's shown by in the pandemic when there was such an increase of people out there that you could tell that people were using it for calmness and recreation during that pandemic and during those hard times. And I think it's very important that we include those experiences in this plan and not all of the what everyone says is users. I really agree that that's a poor word, because it would be nice to not only think of ourselves as using. I think that it's really important to have quiet times where you can watch birds, where you can identify flowers, where you can go slow on a trail, where you can meditate and hear the creek, where you can come out and see a dark night sky. and even where you can smell the resources. I was really happy to see here today that you are doing baseline overlays and that you're really going to have all of those amazing natural assets that MMWD, well, that Marin Water has on their lands, and make sure that you put those at the highest level of preservation. The fish, the butterflies, the biodiversity. If we don't teach our youth how to love nature now, I think with climate change coming, it's going to be so difficult in the future for them to be able to identify with what's going extinct and how an ecological system works. So I highly recommend that you also include youth education, walks and talks with naturalists. I'll let it go at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terry.
Lisa Martell is next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. It's funny that Terry came right before me because I was just contemplating the concept of what was said earlier by one of the bicyclists who had mentioned coexistence. And I really find that the need to coexist on that mountain, it requires that we are in touch with what grows on that mountain and why, if he's not going to see a fetid adder's tongue going 10 miles an hour past it on a bicycle, he's not going to understand the changes that occur over even a shortest period of time of 10 years that I've been hiking the mountain longer than that. But even in 10 years, things have moved because of the changes that are going on. And we can't understand how to coexist unless we understand all of its inhabitants. And I'm going to hand it over to my husband. He's also here. So we're getting 2 for 1. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Tom Martell. I'm a former head of the steering committee on the Sierra Club. And we've had the same problem for over 30 years now. And I've met plenty of nice bikers, most of them being under 20 years old and driving used bikes. But what's happening is that people are attacking the hikers, the bikers are attacking the hikers more than once. They're on trails they shouldn't be, blah, blah, blah. There is a solution to this. That is that all these bikes have to be registered so that you can report bikers who are doing things that aren't legal. And the other is the insurance problem, which is you're just waiting any second. There's going to be a huge crash or something's going to happen on that mountain due to bikers clashing with hikers. And who is responsible for the cash payment or whoever sues? And without addressing those 2 problems, I don't think there's a solution to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Tom.
Now Daniel May is up next.
Hi there very much. So I am a mountain biker on the Marin Academy mountain bike team. And first off, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Tom and Vernon. I think you guys are doing some great advocacy. And I would like to also echo the points mentioned previously that mountain biking has been proven in studies, again, going back all the way to the 90s, that it has a similar impact on the trails compared to hiking. And now this is where I get into a few things in particular. Firstly, mountain bikers are currently congested into major thoroughfares due to a lack of access compared to other groups. And even if there's a minor expansion of some trails, which are opened up to mountain bikers with some conditions, of course, I think that would probably reduce a lot of the problems, as you wouldn't have mountain bikers going nearly as fast to get a level of enjoyment that they would want otherwise, that they can't get without going fast due to doing the same thing 500,000 times seemingly. Secondly, this is something that I believe all trail users can get behind, but on some trails, there is definitely major issues regarding large ruts or puddles of water that were not intended to be there. And if there was a coordinated system for tracking those and making sure that it was not something everybody has to deal with, I think that would be a great improvement. And finally, I think that engaging with people such as Vernon and Tom, who are very highly regarded in the mountain bike community, would be a very good idea for this plan, because usually you'll have a few bad apples with mountain bikers or whatever, but those are the people that they will listen to. And I feel like if there's a conversation on rational rules and what can reasonably happen to keep people safe, because safety should be our first priority, I think that'd be incredibly productive. And this is a final note. I have had multiple instances where dogs have been off the leash, and I have almost went over the bars due to dogs running out in front of me. And I would like to see potentially more information regarding how that's not permitted and more enforcement if required.
All right, thank you, Daniel.
All right, next up, Monty Schmidt.
Thanks so much, and I really appreciate all the work that has gone so far into creating this recreation management plan process. I really like that we started off this process by trying to listen first and to hear from diverse voices about our watershed. I think there are a lot of great voices that have spoken so far, and hopefully more tonight. But I think that there are also a lot of folks who don't normally participate in this type of a process. This is not a common mode for a lot of members of our community, and a lot of folks might have jobs that preclude them from attending. And so I think the emphasis on really reaching out and hearing from diverse voices is really important. And to that end, I hope that we are in this process doing outreach to different community groups that represent the underrepresented communities, the underrepresented participants and enjoyers of our natural resources, and maybe people who don't now but could in the future. I know we have a lot of visitorship now, but I think that the fact that that we're trying to create a watershed recreation plan for the future is really important. Our primary objective, of course, as a board member, I recognize is water. This is where we get our water from, and it is our primary objective. But it doesn't have to be in conflict. And I hope that we can, through this process, work through the places where we know that there is tension. And to that point, I want to specifically really just highlight the tension that has existed for quite some time around mountain biking and other uses. It is a use that has grown, the demand has gone up, and I think that we can find a way to have a different conversation than we have had in the past, I hope, to come up with some solutions that work for all interests. And I think it's going to be a particular challenge for this process, and it will be, I think, a metric by which people will feel that there's success if we have done a good job at figuring out how to create a better outcome all the way around for folks around that issue. And thanks very much for everybody for taking the time tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Monty.
Okay, Walter Greer is up next.
Walter, I think it might be on your end that you have to unmute. I think we got you. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you, Walter, but you have some feedback, so you might be in a room with other devices on. All right. Brian, why don't we try to come back to Walter in a moment?
Sure. Okay, next on the list is Jim. No last name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, my name is Jim. I fish the watershed about 2 to 3 times a week. I would also like to see a focus on improving the fishing at the lakes there, especially management of non-salmonid species. I think they get a lot of focus, but the bass fishing at the lakes there is really great. And as far as improvements, maybe like habitat studies on, you know, the amount of fish there too and stuff like that. That's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Do you want to try to go back to Walter?
Yeah, we can try that again, Brian.
Sure. Walter, are you there this time? It looks like you're muted still. All right, maybe we'll try at the end, circle back to Walter if there's time. So the next speaker then, let's move on down to Devin Riley.
Hi, yeah, I'm a hiker and biker and long-term trail user at Mount Tam. And just sort of my experience has been that mountain biking in particular is sort of underserved, and particularly on single track trails. And that's sort of where my family would best be served by expanding access in the Marin Municipal Water District. Trail systems sort of throughout the country have sort of successfully navigated sharing single track use like trails for hikers and bikers and equestrians. And I think Marin could take a lot of inspiration from that and just look at the systems that they use in order to succeed there. There's a lot of solutions for inclusive trail use that have been used elsewhere, like bell systems and alternate day use or bike only trails. So yeah, I would just love to see more access there. I think we can do it in a way where everyone, you know, it works for everyone. I think it's a sort of use case that is less well represented in meetings like this. I think it's tends to be a younger crowd. So I'd encourage you to just explore that when you're looking for voices in this process. But I'm optimistic that we can find ways to expand bike access and in a way that works for everyone. So thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Devin.
Susan Hopp, you're up.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Susan Hopp. I live in Mill Valley. I've been enjoying the Mount Tam watershed for at least 25 years. So perhaps I'm one of those older voices that the gentleman from Mill Valley at the beginning, I think Brandon, apparently feels shouldn't have as strong a voice as someone younger. And you know, that logically doesn't even hold up to rationale if you consider where would we be without those who fought over the last few decades to preserve the open space that we have for future generations. But that notwithstanding, I wanted to say I'm an avid runner and hiker. I regularly share a few trails with mountain bikers. And I can say that almost to a fault in my experience of the last year, there's a courteousness and accommodation from the bikers I encounter. But nevertheless, I will say the trails that are enjoyed by bikers are very eroded in comparison to hiking only. So I do believe there needs to be an association of use with costs of maintenance and enforcement. And then lastly, I do want to thank Larry Minkus for his spotlight on the myopic human-centric viewpoint and really connecting dots to the existential issue of our time, which is the fact that we are living in the recognized Anthropocene, where one species, humans, are impacting every single ecosystem on our beautiful planet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Valeri is our next speaker.
Hello?
Yeah,
Can
you're
you hear
good.
me?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, can you do me a favor and show us the, I just a point of order. Can you show us the board members? Because it's really helpful for us to see the responses to our questions and our comments. Because this is not a this doesn't feel at all democratic to me. I feel like I'm speaking in a vacuum. Can you do that?
So this is a staff-driven presentation this evening. It was noticed as a board meeting.
I'm sorry.
We'll be happy to kind of put the presentation online and note who was in attendance, if that's helpful.
No, I couldn't understand you. Can you say that again?
So this is a staff-driven presentation this evening. We noticed it as a special board meeting so that board members can attend. We'll put the presentation on the website after this, and we'll note which board members were in attendance.
Okay, so right now you don't know who's in it. You don't know what board members are listening. They're not in the chat or they're not in the anything.
So Valerie, if you want to provide us with any input on the process.
Yes, I will. I just had a
Okay.
question. All right, thank you. So here's my comment. Stewardship is what board members could be. And I've never once heard a board member talk about walking through or enjoying the watershed. And I'm wondering why that is, other than Larry Bragman, when he was looking at the effect of spraying glyphosate on the watershed and the public health nuisance that had turned into. And I need to say the public really needs to see the reactions to their comments. So I hope that next time that can happen. This is really a very isolating and experience. It feels very, like a tunnel or something. And I wanted to say every time I hike a trail, and especially the ones that are not, that are supposed to not have bikes on them, they're covered with tracks, and neighbors in the neighborhoods are always telling me that it is constant friction. And I've been walking in the watershed for about 50 years. And I have to say that we used to have enforcement, and now I never ever see anyone on the trails. I see dogs off leash, people out of control on their bikes, and it's really taken so much of the enjoyment out of it. So when people talk about coexistence, I'm not really sure. It's sort of like, how do you coexist with a high-speed vehicle that's coming at you from both directions? It's doesn't feel like coexistence to many of us anymore, especially as we age. It's getting more and more difficult. What you love and appreciate, you take better care of. I think we need to see some of that happening here. We're just not seeing it. And I really urge our board members who are listening tonight to consider taking a hike and understanding what those of us who are talking about, and I'm not talking about go biking, I'm saying take a hike and go see what it's like to be on two legs out there and watch what's happening to people and watch the reactions. I think it's vital at this point. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie.
Okay, Ben Kalish is our next speaker.
Yeah, hi. My name's Ben. I live in Mill Valley. I've lived in Marin almost my entire life. And in that time, I've spent countless hours on the watershed, hiking and mountain biking. And I'm sort of dismayed to hear some of the comments tonight and like some of the anger. Like the question, how do we coexist, as if there aren't communities all over the country that are coexisting just fine. I love Mount Tam. I love spending time up there and taking care of it. I'm glad to hear that we're taking a data-driven approach. I would encourage Alta to think about the percentage of single track trail separate from fire roads, and think about the percentage of single track trail that's available to each user type, and evaluate its congruency. Because I think that will inform quite a bit about why certain groups are angry, and certain groups don't feel like they're included in the process. The other thing I'd like to say is that because mountain biking is most wholly illegal on single track on Mount Tam, it limits the opportunity for mountain bikers to go out there and maintain trails. We hear a lot about erosion, about damage to the field. If you look at other communities, mountain bikers are usually leading the way in maintenance and managing trails. And there's a lot of opportunity to include the mountain biking community in trail maintenance and helping make sure the trails are healthy for the watershed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Okay, Zachary Warnow is up next.
Sorry, I'm not seeing that name.
He left. Zachary Warnow.
I'm not
Let's try.
seeing it.
Okay, let's go to Nathan Cohen. Sorry, Robert.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, Nathan.
Hi. I wanted to echo a lot of what's been said already. I'm a mountain biker, ratepayer in San Rafael. I hike also, and I drink the water, coincidentally. And I really want to thank you for kind of coming to the table to make these plans. It really does seem like a lot of people are coming with an earnest, like good faith effort to try to, create plans for trail usage and watershed usage that are really reflect the people who enjoy the watershed and the residents and visitors from around town and abroad. It is disappointing to hear that some people are stuck in some pretty ridiculous old stereotypes, just reflexively thinking that, every mountain biker or every hiker or whatever is the same. Like many have said before, try to resist some of those stereotypes because, a lot of those things just are patently not true. I am a mountain biker and I remark to my friends all the time about the beautiful wildlife and wild flowers and so forth. It's kind of silly to try to debase other users because of their preferences when there's no scientific evidence for any additional issues caused by a user. One of the other points that I wanted.
You paid your time, Nathan. So thanks for the input.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew Murado is next.
Hello, I'm a local high school student, and I mainly experience the watershed on bike. However, I still believe the environment is the most important thing. It should be the most important concern here, and that's not only because the watershed is a renowned habitat for biodiversity, but also because it's the function it serves in the watershed, and also because many of the reasons why people recreate on the watershed is because of the nature. With that said, though, I don't think that there's any reason to not go forward in expanding bicycle access, because cyclists don't want to be riding through wetland habitats or creek crossings or be eroding the trails, right? I think here we have the opportunity to balance recreation with cycling and the environment and the watershed so that we can create a healthier area and one that provides better access for everyone. Additionally, I've heard a lot of talk on the topic of safety, and I think it's become way too divisive that we have this culture here where it's hikers versus bikers. I enjoy hiking on the trails just as much as I do biking. And most recently, I've had some pretty scary experiences myself where I've been threatened by one hiker in particular, where they said they would push me off my bike. I wasn't going above 15 miles per hour, and it was kind of startling just to hear that there's that sort of resentment. So I think it's time that we acknowledge this conflict and work towards avoiding that, because there are a lot of out there opportunities. There's a lot of means to do that. And if you look around the country, Lake Tahoe, Lake Sonoma, those are local ones, but there's ways to balance this sort of thing. And I think it's my hope that that will come out of this process. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew.
Next is Anna Dirksey and Justin Ingleton.
Hi, my name's Anna Dirksey, and my husband and I live in San Geronimo. I was introduced to the watershed actually as a watershed aide a few years ago when I first moved out here. First started out hiking, now biking, grew up riding horses, not here, but I understand some of the concerns that horse people have in terms of spooking. It's not fun to fall off a horse anyway, more so than it is fall off a bike. I guess I'd also just like to, in this, bring up sort of the importance that the very first speaker, Roger, did in terms of signage and having better signage, and also using signage to educate and have, you have a captive user at that moment in time. And my work most recently in the Lagunitas watershed has been around invasive plants. And so I think something that's constantly on my mind is, we have people moving through this environment, and how are we, or you as the land managers, making sure that we provide opportunities such as boot brushes and wash stations for people to prevent the spread of invasive weeds, because that is a huge problem, obviously, in both terms of management and ecosystem diversity. So, but I think, that being said, the watershed is something that I've grown to love, being a transplant to the area. And I think that it's important that we don't ignore the fact that people are going to be out there regardless of whether or not we tell them not to, and that we need to come up with solutions that address those problems rather than just ignore them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Robert Frankel is up.
Okay, I have been a hike leader and hiker for 45 years. I'm a member of the Alpine Club, 3 private hiking groups, Friends of Mount Tam. None of those organizations participated in your 2 previous meetings. We were not included. That was deliberate, just like the e-bike committee had a large majority of Marin Bike Coalition members. It is impossible for us to share single track trails at any time with bikes. There's no room to pass. The trails are being illegally used. They are currently gouged and pulverized to the extent that in some places they are impassable. The Water District has insufficient staff to enforce its current regulations. I have been on more than one occasion been laughed at when we have pointed out that riding downhill on the Laurel Dell Fire Road right into a group of hikers at well over 20 miles an hour is not a threat to us because he could stop. I'm sorry, the bikes have a place on the mountain, but it does not include single track trails any more than motorcycles, bicycles, scooters, etc. are allowed on pedestrian sidewalks. It's the same pedestrian access. please do not set an example for the entire country to have this entire area inundated by touring mountain bikes to come to the home of the mountain bike and trash that mountain. It's impossible to share single track trails, of which you only have 60 or so miles. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Next speaker is Donald Herzog.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I'm an 80-year-old biker and hiker, been on the mountain for 60 years. I hope the study includes consideration of the existing facilities such as the stables on there and if they're appropriate, and also considers the possibility of additional physical facilities that would fit in and for the user groups. Hopefully, this is a well-organized presentation and study, and I appreciate what you're doing. Hopefully we can avoid organized pressure groups taking over the discussion and imposing their will on everyone, and we can consider all the citizens, even those that can't normally appear at things like this, people that work for a living and have young kids and things like that. But thank you very much, but do consider the appropriateness of the existing stables and additional facilities if we need them. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Donald.
All right, and now we'll try Walter Greer one more time. Maybe third time's a charm.
Walter, it looks like it's still on your end, that it's not being unmuted.
All right, you're unmuted now.
So I think we'll keep going in the interest of time. And I'll just note that on the district's website for the recreation management planning process, there will be a way for anybody who's interested in this to sign up for notifications around it. The previous processes, we notified all user groups, but we've streamlined it this way by having it be available for you to sign up. And then also there will be a point of contact. So Walter Greer, if there's something you want to share with us, you'll be able to email our Mount Tamalpais Watershed email address through the website and let us know what input you wanted to provide this evening. So the next planning meeting, I think, Cole, if you want to go to the next slide.
There was a few more hands up, Sean.
Am I jumping? All right, go for it.
Yeah, I just said Walter got in the queue and then some folks came in after him. Next is Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary Wells, a Fairfax native and ratepayer. And I would like to advocate for more accommodation of dog owners. Approximately 50% of households in California, probably more in Marin, own dogs. And just like people, not all dogs are alike. Many dogs are perfectly capable of minding their own business, staying with their handlers, and heeding voice commands. Having a dog on leash on single track trails is hazardous to dog handlers, especially those who are older or who don't have good agility. I would like to see enforcement applied in situations where needed, that is where harm is a factor and not just because a blanket generalized rule has been established. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Laura Chariton is next.
Hi, thank you. I've been hiking here on the mountain for 40 plus years, and I have a master's degree in riparian policy and restoration and president of the Watershed Alliance of Marin. Most all of my work has been to protect the watershed. I agree wholly with Larry Minikis, Susan Hopp, Linda Novi, Elisa, and Tom Martell, and Robert Frankel. The underserved community of the MMWD are the wildlife that barely are entered into this conversation, who are here speaking for them. Who here are speaking for the Native Americans that took care of this land for thousands of years and their love and respect for this place because they understood they needed it to survive. They understood sustainability and kept the waters clean and could drink from the streams. Not surprisingly, Alta is known for planning bicycle and pedestrian use in urban settings. Please research this, public. This is not an urban setting, and I have little confidence that this project is being handled by those who understand ecosystem health and respect the biological significance of this biosphere. ESA for biology appears to be an afterthought, like, oops, we forgot our responsibility of protecting all wildlife and plants. Animals are not adapted to escape the speeds of mountain bikes that almost never obey the passing speeds. That is not acknowledged here. I take pictures of run over animals. I no longer hike the areas I used to because there's rarely a time when I don't encounter a cyclist speeding and riding illegally on single track or the hogback, and I reported it so many times. This recreation is my only recreation. The unbelievable disconnect that so many cyclists express as their eco-centric frustration of not being able to ride wherever they want will forever be a death knell for much wildlife. Imagine that your ranger tells you that he couldn't stop a woman flying down the hogback on her mountain bike. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Boris Yanofsky is next.
Yeah, hi, thank you all. Boris Yanofsky here. I'm a mountain biker and trail runner, hiker. I use the trails up in the watershed pretty frequently for biking, for hiking, for all kinds of outdoor recreation. At first, I just want to say thank you all for taking this on. This is no easy task, but much appreciated and much needed. I kind of want to make a comment about really the division and the animosity that we're kind of seeing here in some of the comments, some of the guests that are kind of commenting and speaking on this. And it's really, I want to say that it's reflected in reality when we are out there as hikers and as mountain bikers. It's kind of sometimes gotten to the point where, as a mountain biker, if I passed by a hiker, I almost kind of am prepared to have some kind of a confrontation for whatever reason. So it's really unfortunate that, we can't just kind of be civil about this and have a reasonable discussion about a public land that we can all share. Let's face it, the reality is that mountain biking is becoming more popular. There's a lot more people out there riding bikes, and there's really very limited access to mountain biking on the watershed, to legal, strict mountain biking. And I'm talking specifically about single track as well. So, kind of what do you expect, I guess, when there isn't a lot of access and a lot of area for mountain bikers to go, is that they'll overflow into hiking areas and there'll be conflict there. So I just want to kind of reiterate again, and just, thank you all for doing this and taking this on. It's going to do a great public good, and, we all appreciate it from either side, even though, there is kind of a lot of tension in our comments here in our conversations. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Boris.
Chris Borgian is up next.
Sorry, we're having a problem with Chris. He's using an older version of Zoom that's not allowing me to allow him to talk.
Okay, sorry, Chris. We'll move on to Andrew Levine then.
Hi there. My name is Andrew Levine.
Andrew, you've got a bit of feedback. You're probably in a room with other devices, so.
Sorry about that. Fix that up. So my name is Andrew Levine. I'm from Mill Valley. I'm an environmentalist, and I'm one of these old folks. I've been on the mountain for 50 years, hiking around, biking around. From my early experiences on the mountain, I dedicated my career to working for a water agency, helping support the public and good uses of water in the watershed. I'd have to say, and that's because of my early experiences on the watershed as a kid. If you go see, you've heard several high schoolers talk about how they've learned to love and respect the watershed because they're out on it. And the future of supporting the watershed is these kids who are out there and learning and respecting this place. And I disagree with folks who mentioned that on a bicycle, we don't see the subtleties out there. I know that mountain up and down over that half century. I've seen the changes. I know where there's damage. I know where there's good habitat, and it's very important to me. As I've gotten older and I'm now disabled, I can no longer hike on the watershed. The only way for me to safely enjoy it is on a bicycle. And this resistance to expanded use is just another word for institutional exclusion. Folks who have it don't want to share it. The rest of the world has figured out how to share a watersheds and cycling and hiking and anglers and all these other things. And I think we can look to them and figure out how to do it. So thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I appreciate the inclusiveness of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
We have a caller up next. The last four digits of the number are 8800.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, great. Okay, my name is Nancy Okada, and I'm a longtime Marin resident. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to make some comments. We really need to protect our watershed and its biodiversity, and I hope that you'll keep that in mind when you're doing your report, your project. You know that the East Bay Municipal Utility District does not allow bicycles in its watershed. And it's got a very large watershed, and they do not allow bikes in its watershed. So they all come over here. So to protect the environment, the Sierra Club believes that bike users should stay on the fire trails. That's all bike users. And that's a good idea. That really will protect the environment. I've seen Alta's work in Los Angeles, which features large, wide bulldozed paths with wire handrails. And I hope that that will not be the template that you will use for Mount Tam. So we're entrusting you with this work, and I hope that you protect our environment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Laura is next.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, you're good, Laura.
All right, I'm a dog owner, and I agree with what Mary said earlier. And presently I have a leashed dog because he is not well controlled. And in the past I have had very well behaved dogs, and someday I hope to have one of those again. And I hope to be able to hike with it off leash. And I pick up all the dog do that he does, and I carry it with me. I do not leave it on the trail in those little baggies. And as far as bikers are concerned, I'm mainly a hiker, and as long as bikers can verbally say hello to me, I am fine with sharing MMWD with them. And Kent Lake also has some vegetation growing on its surface, and I hope you will mechanically remove it instead of poisoning it if you find that it needs to be removed. And that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Okay. Sean, that's everyone who's spoke once. There's a few hands up for people who have already spoken. I'm not sure if they want to go again or for some reason their hands just didn't go down.
I think we're going to ask people to hold their comments for the second meeting, just in the interest of time here tonight. We do have a couple additional slides to give everyone kind of the final opportunities for participation, or upcoming rather, opportunities for participation. So as we mentioned, the next opportunity to engage in this process will be through a watershed site visit, really designed to get people together out on the watershed to have a shared experience. We'll talk about some of the issues and but we'll bring those observations back to this broader meeting for further discussion. That's going to be at our Bon Tempe parking area on a Wednesday and during the day. And I'll just note that we won't have all of our meetings on the watershed during the day, but we are going to fluctuate them. So we understand that not everybody will be able to make all of them, but we'll move the times around to accommodate folks. So that's going to be July 6th, and then July 13th will be our next workshop, which will be a virtual meeting again. And we'll start to look at some of our watershed surveys from 2013, the information that we gained from that process. We'll look at how we're going to be going about the data collection for this next planning effort. We'll talk about some of the data analytics that we'll be carrying out, and we'll look at some of our biological monitoring activities in association with those surveys and how we can kind of overlay and build off of that to have a more comprehensive understanding of the current state of things. So that's the intention for the next couple of meetings. And we want to thank you all for being engaged in this process, being interested, and for your energy and support for moving this forward. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you on July 6th on the watershed. And if you have a need for additional information, go to the website. That's where we're going to be continuing to update it with information as it comes out and putting these presentations and supporting documents. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening.